Yeah, yeah.
We are the epitome of Black female love.
It's
Yeah.
easy for us as Black women to hold up the banner and the cause for everyone else. But again, who holds up the banner and the cause for us? What role does the church play in all of this stuff?
Is that we as a Black church are perpetuating the same behavior as a patriarchal evangelicals have been
That's
doing.
right. And guess
Church. But it's the sisters in the congregation.
But it's a lot of times it is the Black women who bring us down more, or push or try to silence our voices more in the Black church.
Hold on.
Hello, ladies. Hello. We are at the end of the second month of the year. And so, ladies, who wants to start? How are you? And Wallace, I need you to check the private chat. Our guests, please let us know that you are here and where it is that you're listening from.
Hello. Greetings, everybody. I'm excited. As you guys know, I've been recuperating from this total knee replacement. And so I'm still in my place of healing. My knee feels absolutely amazing. I'm ready to leap over pews again. But dealing with that, just going through the normal changes of the healing. And this is my second knee replacement. So I'm really glad. And I'm grateful to be able to have it done, to be done with it, so that my summer is not held up by walking around with my knee clicking. And of course the weather's here is beautiful.
In Jesus' name.
Yes.
Dr. Wallace, how are you?
I'm good. I'm thankful and grateful, and I'm good. It's just been a busy 2 days already.
Obrey, Hendricks.
I'm a silent and talk to our
Oh, she would not be Wallace. I love our sister. Oh my goodness. While she's doing that, Dr. Bradford.
It's good to be back in the house. I tell you, I am so excited about what God is doing in this season of all of our lives. This is a good season for us all.
That
right?
is. That it is.
And when we're obedient, it gets even better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. We do want to say hello to our viewing audience, Minister Jones, Renee Jones. Good to have you here, and I see members of your BTG family are here. So good to have you all with us on today, Sharon Mitchell. And so I need y'all, Marjorie Hamilton Scott. So good to have you all with us on today. So you all, I need y'all to kind of fill me in, right? Because I know, Wallace, we want to hear a little bit from you because you were at the Proctor Conference at the top of last week. And then I was in Atlanta for another conference, and I realized that I had not watched the weather or anything. And so I got a notice when it was time for me to fly out on Monday. And I've been I'd arrived on Wednesday in Georgia, and I got the notice on Monday, and it was like, oh, I could change my flight due to weather. And you know, those moments you don't realize your head has been buried in the sand because you hadn't seen anything, right? And I was like, are we having bad weather in the country?
I know, I said the same thing. Wait a minute.
And so, yeah, so I think all of our schedules like that. But Wallace, you were at the Proctor Conference. Come on, tell us about
I'm trying to come down.
Mess me up.
It started out with our former guest, Dr. Melva Sampson. She said, the street lights are on.
Yes.
And then Succession was the night sermon by Teresa Fry Brown and Brandon Crowley.
Yes.
It was just an amazing, amazing conference. And most of it was around civic engagement and social justice. All the pastors, I want to just repeat what the bishop said, and about when you have new members, make them bring their voter registration card. And if they don't have it, register them to vote and tell them who their representatives are in every area, local and national. So I thought that was an excellent idea, but I'm trying to come down. I'm trying to come down.
What about didn't God deliver Daniel?
Michelle Guidry.
Yeah, Michelle Guidry, come on here.
Listen, like I say, I'm trying to come down. If you go on Facebook and type in the 2023 Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, you can see those awesome sermons that, oh my goodness, that Michelle Guidry looked at that text differently than I have ever. In fact, I would never have preached that text of terror. But she was just amazing. That all of them, everybody, Gina Stewart, everybody.
Yeah, it was a whole, from what I understand, it was a whole different Gina Stewart.
Yes. Yeah.
Like we've not ever seen her before, because every time she stands behind that pulpit, it's a major word. But what I understand at Proctor, it was like through the stratosphere.
Up there.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and so let me ask you this. I know you're at the Proctor Conference, and this now is old news in this regard, but we hadn't had a chance. This is the first time all of us have been together here in a while, and so good to see all of my sisters here with us. And so have you all heard, so here it is that you talk about the Proctor Conference and the preaching and social action, justice, and that part, and then you have what's been happening at Asbury. What
y'all help me. I have had my head in the sand. So help me with that.
So none of you all are aware. This is Asbury, the college campus, and the revival that has been going on. I think now it should be moving toward a month. That the revival has happened, in as much as the professors and others have students who are in the chapel, the worship service. I mean, it's been real lenient in regard to that. And so when you look at, we talk about the kind of preaching that happened at Proctor Conference. We talk about this outpouring that seems to be happening among the students here on this campus, and I believe it's been. My understanding is that now it is spread to about 3 or 4 other college campuses as well. Y'all.
We can say that. I mean, it's time. A revival needs to come. We need a revival. I mean, all the stuff that we're going through, all the things that are happening, it's time for a real revival. You know, you have these 3-night revivals, a week revival, but my goodness, it's time for that gut revival. Revival. Amen. I don't want just a head revival. I need a heart revival.
A heart revival.
Yes.
I need a gut revival. I need a transformational revival. I need a lifting of my hands for real revival. Amen.
So let me ask you all this, and I know our guest is backstage, and we do want to bring him up. You know that we have it seems to be at times this split in the body of Christ. I'm not going to deal with what we've dealt with evangelicals during back. I'm not going to deal with that part, but I want to deal with this part. There seems to be a group of folk who believe that that there's no place for social justice, right? Talking about voter registration and people rights, right? That is contradictory toward what is happening if we're talking about what's going on at Asbury. Is there, it is, and perhaps it's a question we pose to our guest in a moment and his coming up. But what about that? Because it seems to be, some people say that all that social justice stuff, the church ain't no place for that, right? We just need to talk about what's gonna come.
Well, I think our guest is a very perfect person to answer that question, particularly looking at the book that we're looking at today, The Politics of Jesus, might be the right person for just a time as this.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. You want to introduce our guest then?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The Reverend Dr. Obrey M. Hendricks Jr. is a lifelong social activist. He is celebrated commentator on the intersection of religion and political economy in America. A widely sought lecturer and media spokesman, Dr. Hendricks' appearances on every television network channel, some that include CNN, NBC, MSNBC, CBS, Fox News, Fox Business, the Discovery Channel, PBS, BBC, NHK, just go on and on and on, and not just here, but in other countries, Japan and everywhere else across the world. Dr. Hendricks has been a member of the Faith Advisory Council of the Democratic National Committee. He delivered the closing benediction at the 2008 Democratic Convention. He has advised the United States Department secretaries such as Ambassador Hillary Clinton and John Kerry. He's a distinguished senior fellow at the Democracy Collaborative in Washington, D.C. Dr. Hendricks is a frequent contributor to several magazines, the Huffington Post, Sojourners Magazine, and Salon.com. I want y'all to welcome the scholar par excellence. His accomplishments just expand from Wall Street to the streets. So from Payne Theological Seminary to Princeton, just from everywhere. And our girlfriend, your other elder on the program is Dr. Chalice Bradford of the AME Church. Thank you so much, Dr. Hendricks, for being here with us today. We appreciate you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm listening to you read my bio. Said, me and George Santos, man, we we can come up with all kinds of stuff to make ourselves sound good. No, thank you. I'm glad to.
Your stuff is true. That stuff is false.
Lord help us.
Yeah, mine is
What an
true.
unfair comparison, sir.
Mine is true. I'm thankful. Poor boy from Farmville, Virginia, who was put out of high school more times than I can count and flunked out of college and got in trouble in the Black nationalist movement, and at some point decided I was going to make a contribution. So I'm thankful that I've been able to make a small contribution to our struggle. I heard your conversation on the revival, and I got to tell you, I don't, as my grandmother saying, I ain't studying no revival unless it makes folk do like Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, he's anointed me to preach good news to the poor, or unless it's doing what the Spirit did to the disciples and the followers of Jesus in the upper room when the Spirit came on them and broke down all their barriers and they could understand each other's needs and interests and all of that. And, if we see them be concerned about justice, be concerned instead of just us, then, it'll be meaningful. But until that time, as far as I'm concerned, until I see something different, it's just more, emotional bluster and folk, emotional catharsis. And, so I don't, there are people that I know that are there that I respect, but, look, until I see something different, I don't care about people throwing up holy hands, You know what I mean? That doesn't mean anything, hollering and screaming and, and showing up and standing in line. That doesn't do anything unless you're trying to help somebody, unless you're trying to love your neighbor as yourself. Let's see if they try to love their neighbors as themselves. If not, hey, man, that's just another exercise that I have no interest in. Do I sound blasphemous? Maybe, but that's where I stand on it.
Sounds like that's where Jesus was.
Amen.
Throwing stuff out the temple because folk were acting crazy. So sounds like them same folk are in the church today. So
yes, Lord.
I'm grateful for you to be here with us, Dr. Hendricks. Our guests are really looking forward to the politics of Jesus. I went through that book, and I'm telling you, it was a revival for me. Especially those things that you saw were areas that were strategies of Jesus. But before we get into that, would you just deconstruct for our audience how this meek and mild Jesus is transformed into a revolutionary political Jesus?
I'll do it, but before I do that, I just want to say you talked about I'm grateful you are for me to be here, but you didn't give me much choice. I told her that I had a dinner invitation at the White House. She said, "Lay it for them white folks. You come out, you come with us." No.
You ought to stop.
No, really, no. I'm really. I respect Dr. Brenda Perry Wallace very much, and I'm really honored. The people who were around Jesus, well, I guess the main reason, there are a lot of reasons that people see Jesus as this meek and mild Jesus. I think the earliest reasons for it go back to at least the time of Emperor Constantine, when, the emperor of the Roman Empire forwarded a vision of Jesus that would serve, at least would not challenge the power of the empire. And with the Jesus movement, what was important was the way you live. That's what Jesus taught. He taught almost completely taught ethics. He taught very little what to believe. No theology or doctrines or anything like that. When Constantine claimed that God had given him the power to kill more people in pursuit of his own personal aggrandizement than his opposing general, and then said that God made him the 13th apostle appointed by God, which meant that no one could question him. And he took, at that point, he embraced Jesus, and the faith of the oppressed became the religion of the oppressor. And since that time, the powers that be, the ruling stratum of every society that Christianity has been in, mainstream Christianity has been in cahoots with, has been in support of, aligned with the powers that be, the ruling powers that be, no matter how oppressive they might be. History bears that out. So I think that's the first thing that happened. But when you really get down to it, even when we go back to Paul, Paul has very little to say about the setting that Jesus came up in. Paul seems to know very little about Jesus. He talks about Jesus in his setting in life. He says almost nothing about it. He doesn't even know about the Immaculate Conception. So Paul takes Jesus out of context and takes the Jesus who struggled and talked about poor people and poverty and was executed as a political agitator by the Roman Empire. He takes that Jesus, that embodied Jesus, and makes him into a disembodied Jesus Christ. And so I mean, the problem is that folks started focusing on Jesus outside of the context of his time. And so the Lord's Prayer, for instance, folk don't know that when Jesus talks about, tells his disciples be concerned about people's debt being forgiven or released, that's financial debts be released, that they don't know that he's referring to this terrible debt situation that enslaved people, literally had people enslaved, sometimes had whole villages enslaved for the debt of one family, and often the debt was to the priest, was to priests. So we won't get into what establishment religious folks can do. We know Christian preachers don't do that. No black preachers anyway.
Ooh, excuse me. Let me just unmute for a minute and go. Ooh. All right, go ahead.
But so I mean, that's how we got to that. And then when you get into the modern era, of course, they don't want the full power of Jesus, to be discussed, the full power to be embraced and known by the people, because that would challenge the powers that be. So that's how we get this disembodied Jesus, who's not concerned with the excesses of the political economy in any epoch. This disembodied Jesus, who's not concerned with oppression and dehumanization of people, but he's concerned about over yonder. And it's, in other words, that Jesus is not Jesus. and that's the Jesus we have, the not Jesus. And we know the not Jesus because the right-wing evangelicals can embrace it in the name of Donald Trump, and who's a hateful piece of trash, hateful. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, he's a low life. He's the kind of person you would not want your children to be around. I mean, it's true.
You're right.
He's the worst of the worst. Attacks women. He insults everybody. He's known for stealing. He's been sued literally thousands of times for stealing from folk. And they can align themselves behind these right-wing evangelicals, can align themselves behind him and talk about him being a Messiah, because they don't know a damn thing about Jesus Christ. Let's just say it. They don't know the first thing about Jesus Christ. Y'all got me started. Let me stop.
But you're right on, Doc. You are right on. It's all about their own self-aggrandizement. Nothing about the people. Nothing about the oppressed. I think you begin your book talking about what was Jesus's call. Why did Jesus come? And Luke says he came to set the captives free.
Yeah.
So if that's not why Jesus came, what, for money, for power, for that would not be the Jesus I would like to to follow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jesus. I mean, so we know that Luke 4:18 is. We're told that's the first public sermon of Jesus, and what's significant about it, because in that sermon he's telling the world who he is and what he is about, and what he is about is he's concerned about the economic struggles of the people. He talks about good news for the poor. He's concerned about the health concerns of the people. Their physical well-being. He's concerned about their political status. He says, bring liberation to the oppressed. That's the way that should be translated. And, at the end, when he talks about, the Jubilee, about, how does he say it? The year of the Lord's,
favor.
Year of the Lord's favor. Yeah, that's talking about the Jubilee, which is, again, about liberation. It's about people being liberated from stifling, crushing debts. And as I said earlier, one of the major sources of debt was loans from the priestly aristocracy. And so, Jesus is, I mean, when we look at it in context, Jesus is, he is opposing the priestly aristocracy at almost every turn, which is why they wanted him dead, of course. So I forgot what the question was, but
sound familiar, doesn't it?
Sound
familiar?
Yeah, well, it's a shame. I mean, it's a shame. But that's his calling, and that's his setting in life. And see, the whole problem is that Jesus is not is mostly not taught with regard to his setting in life.
In Laban.
Yeah, it sits in Laban. I mean, the brother is he was a an embattled imperial subject. He was like Howard Thurman says, if that he had no rights, so that if a Roman kicked him in the ditch, he'd just be a Jew in the ditch. And that's not really talked about, and I mean, why is he going all around Galilee and preaching to the people? Sounds like he's trying to raise consciousness, among the folks. Why does he go to the temple and disrupt the temple? He's trying to raise consciousness against the priestly aristocracy. He's in direct dialogue with his setting in life because he's concerned about the people and their suffering. What kind of Messiah would he be if that was not his concern?
And you talk about one of his strategies as being treat the people's need. Look at what the people need and see that as holy. So what I'm hearing you say now is that Jesus was more concerned about the economics of the poor and not necessarily the economics of those that have. He was concerned about the have-nots and not those that have.
Oh yeah. I mean, he talked about that more, the poor people, more than anything other than God. That was because the folk were there was widespread poverty and hunger and oppression, and that's what his primary concern was. I mean, even in the heights of the beatific heights of the Beatitudes, he's talking about blessed are you poor folk. I mean, you don't have to tell people they're blessed if they know they're blessed. That gives us a clue on how beaten down the people were by their oppression. But I called that strategy treat the people's needs as holy, because I was reflecting on the Lord's Prayer and what the meaning of the Lord's Prayer would be. Now we have to remember that they asked Jesus to teach them the disciples asked Jesus to teach them how to pray, but that couldn't have been what they were asking him. I mean, ultimately, because Jews knew how to pray. I mean, they were asking what should their concerns be. Like in Luke, he says, teach us how to pray as John taught his disciples to pray. In other words, what we should ask God to empower us to do, to guide us to do, or to do on our behalf. And so as I'm looking through that, I'm looking at him, realizing essentially he's telling the disciples. Remember, he starts off by saying, "Our Father." So there's not just some private personal prayer. It's a prayer about the concerns of the people. Our Father, who art in heaven. And I said, "Wow, he's telling these disciples to treat people's needs as holy. He's telling them to be, when they pray to God, to pray about the people's needs, their economic needs, their hunger, their need to be free from this terrible debt system and all of that." And I'm in a cabin up in Maine. I'd won a raffle, and I won a week or two up in Maine. I'm up there writing this book. And when that thing hit me, man, it just knocked me off my feet. I just cried. I said, well, that is what the Lord's Prayer is telling us, to treat the people's needs as holy. And that is the most important thing. That comports with love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, all the kinds of things that, right-wing evangelicals and white supremacists have taken out of their Bibles.
That Matthew 25 sounds to me like what Jesus's prayer is about.
Yeah,
How connecting the prayer with what Jesus said we needed to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm not too proud to say that I hadn't made that connection. So thank you. I'm also not too proud to say that when I write it, I ain't giving you no credit for it. Just you know. but seriously,
but there is it is a connection between the prayer and Matthew 25.
No, absolutely, because Matthew 25, 31 through 46 is the primary mode of judgment that Jesus gives us, right? And it said we're going to be judged by and put it succinctly, we'll be judged by whether we're trying to love somebody, to care for somebody. That's how we're going to be judged, not by who we sleep with or who we say we believe, how much we say we believe, whether we, stand up to giving honor God as the head of my life, or, you can sleep in the church and all that kind of stuff. But none of that matters.
You ain't fed the hungry. If you haven't visited,
trying to help nobody. And it says, and if you haven't tried to feed anyone, you haven't tried to be concerned with answering people's most basic needs, it said, then you're going to hell. So the way to go to hell, it didn't say anything about what you believe or whether you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. It never said that. It says it's about how you live and act in the world. That's the problem with Paul. Paul makes it about Jesus. Jesus makes it about God and the teachings of God. And that's why we have these problems. And and it's also why I don't know why so many preachers, they'll preach from the Old Testament and from Paul more than they will in the Gospels. That'll tell you something.
Something wrong.
Oh wow.
Dr. Hendricks, let me ask you this. One of our viewers made this statement, but I guess to kind of hear your view on the statement. It says many evangelicals come from the point of shame and blame. You got yourself into that hole. Get yourself out.
That's what evangelicals are saying to poor people, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. That's
a bootstraps comment.
Yeah, it is, and it's wrong. That's not what Jesus says. Jesus says when people, it's propaganda. We all know, all of us here know on this call, we know that it's propaganda that people are poor because they're just sorry. We know that we are in a capitalist political economy that exploits people, always has. It made it illegal for most of the nation's history for us to even engage in capital formation. It discriminates against folk in all kinds of ways. It's everything's in service to a select few making coins. Even if you have a job and you get laid off because there's a slight downturn in the economy and the capitalists don't want to lose, a penny or two per share in earnings, and you're unemployed, does that make you lazy? Does that make you sorry? No. And so some of them, and one guy, Jody Arrington from some nobody congressman in Texas, he quotes, I think it's 2 Corinthians. It says, if they will not work, let them not eat. Well, there are a couple of things with that.
Thessalonians. Yeah.
Did I say that? Yeah, I meant Thessalonians. Yeah. If they do not work, well, Paul was writing about folk who, thought that they were so holy and that they didn't have to work, that they should be supported in their spirit, in their spirituality by everybody else, like we see in Israel with the ultra Orthodox. They don't have to work. They're supported by everybody else. Well, Paul is saying, no, that's a bunch of bull. No, if these super holy folk won't work, then they'll let them eat, which means they'll get off the behinds and work. But they take it out of context and use that against us. It's always propaganda. Folk, if you laid off, and you can and you don't have savings, that makes you sorry, that makes you lazy. I mean, it's a demonic system, and we need to call it that. It's demonic because it's not about taking care of the least of these. It's not about loving a neighbor. It's not about responsibility to society or even the communities that their factories and business are in. It's all about me and mine and individualism. And there's in the biblical witness is never about being dedicated to individual aggrandizement. It's always about the community good, right? Yeah. Always about the community. And that's what's gotten so screwed up now. Christianity now, that and these prosperity anti-gospel preachers, they get to talk about it's like, well, it doesn't matter if the pie is the pie is dishonest, the pie is corrupt. You just get your own piece of it, and that's anti-gospel. Isn't it exasperating that they've gotten away with this? I mean, they better hope Jesus doesn't come back. That's all I got to say.
Well, Doc, talk to us about that next strategy of give a voice to the voiceless.
Yeah.
So many of them are catching the bus every day, going to a job that pays less than a fair wage, trying to do their best. So who should be talking for them? How do we give them a voice?
All right. Because I have not memorized a book like some folks might memorize their stuff. Yeah, this is from is that from Mark 5? The it's cleansing of the temple. Oh yes. Oh yeah. We so many people, shamefully, so many of our people do not really understand what the forces are that are assailing them. I say shameful, not shame on them, but shame on the leaders, and particularly church leaders. Some of whom don't even pick up a newspaper, it seems. They don't say anything that's useful to the people in terms of freeing themselves. Many people don't know what's going on. They don't have the time or the leisure. People are working hard and this, that, and the other. And those of us, who have the luxury of staying up on the issues, which includes all but a handful of pastors, because that's what pastors are paid to do. And I don't care if they are bivocational. They're paid to know what's going on in society so they can help their people. Sorry, jokers. So many of them don't do it. I don't want to get in that. They use their time to do all kinds of other stuff, but you don't find them in their study. They don't even need studies. What they need to study for? They don't study. And that's not all of them, but y'all know some of them. So let's face it, some of them, and they need to go. But anyway, those of us who have the leisure and the wherewithal to pay attention to what's happening, we have a responsibility to speak for the people. We have a responsibility to go and speak to Caesar, to speak to the powers that be, to write to the powers that be, to demonstrate, to lead the people that way, to lead speaking of the church, if we can lead our churches to ushers, annuals and all that kind of stuff, or we can lead folks to a protest, or we can lead folks somewhere where they can get a lecture to know exactly what the forces are doing that are affecting their lives, because a lot of people know something's wrong, but they don't know what it is and how to and how to deal with it. Well, that's what I mean by give a voice to the voices. I mean, Jesus did that when he had the cleansing of the temple. The folk were wondering what they knew that something was wrong with the way the priests would treat them, but they also believed that the priests had God on their side. So folk never really rose up against them. even though the priests were exploiting them. And I talk about in the book all the kinds of stuff was going on. But Jesus, when he did the cleansing of the temple, this was like, it's like like a revelation to people. It's like, wait, you mean he came here and he opposed these folk and just walked out like a natural man and nobody did anything to him? Well, they're not as powerful as we thought. God didn't send down lightning to kill him. We have to break the ice. And that's what I mean, give a voice to the voiceless, to say out loud what the folk are thinking. But a lot of them don't know that. They wonder whether they're crazy. They don't know if they're right. They don't even know that other people are thinking the same thing they're thinking. But you stand up and you speak out, well, that opens up a lot of folk. That wakes up a lot of, and we don't see a lot of that going on now. We see some, for instance, Al Sharpton responds to particular wrongs, and that's necessary. But nobody's standing up really to the system itself. Martin Luther King did. He spoke out against capitalism. He said we need to explore democratic socialism. We need to look at some alternative because this is not happening. But these so-called Negro leaders today, they're not doing that. Not even William Barber. Because that's not his thing. He's working the Poor People's Campaign. He's dealing with policy on the ground. But at some point, we got to question the whole system, the principalities and powers, which is not going on. But, back in the day, Reverend Ransom from the AME Church did it. They were the Black Christian socialists in the early 20th century. They were questioning the whole system. But now, no, man, what they wanted, preachers want to be close to the seat of power. And so they're not going to question power. Yeah, I'm hard on preacher. I'm ordained in AME Church. I'm a preacher too. But we got to tell the truth. Let's face it. And, and it's shameful because last thing let me say, all this going on with this piece of trash, this lying guy in the White House, all he did to this country, there was a study done, 100,000 people died from COVID who didn't have to die when he was playing games and all that. And who stood up against him in the Black church? Of note. I'm sure there were people on the ground, but of note. What did Jake say? With his big bully pulpit. What did our denomination say? We should have been flooding it. It's shameful. It's shameful, and it's a relinquishing of gospel responsibility.
So, Dr. Henderson, you talked about the giving the voice to the voiceless, and that's truly, truly powerful because you're right. Some people want to speak up, don't know how to speak up, don't know where to go to speak up. Strategy number 3 talks about expose the workings of the oppression.
Yeah. And that's a response. Leaders, this was based on the workers in the vineyard in Matthew 20, which the way this is explained traditionally is just so wrong. But essentially, what Jesus was doing in Matthew 21 through 19, I think it is, he was holding in bold relief what these workers were going through, how they were being mistreated, how they were being exploited in ways that they might not have even thought about before. And so he exposed how to them just in their hearing just how exploited they were. You recall they were standing around in the marketplace, all these displaced workers. Well, if peasants are standing in the marketplace, this means that their land has been taken from them some kind of way through debt or something. One scholar did a study and said that some 60% of the land in Galilee was owned by the Herod and his cohorts. And so that's our first clue. The people, if they're standing around waiting for somebody to hire them, well, then that's the first clue about oppression. They've been dispossessed. And so they're standing around desperate. And they're so desperate that when this so-called householder comes out and asks them if they want to work, which is ridiculous, they're standing out there, man, what you saying? Do they want to work? And they go with him without even asking how much they're going to be paid, and on down the line. And in this Matthew 20, folks should look at it, and when you read it, it's interpreted as the householder is God. Well, that ain't the God that I know, who's exploitive of people and all that. And at the end, they ask him. I mean, they grumble against him, not against each other, because they feel they've been exploited. And this householder tells him, he said, friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Well, friend, the word they use, Hatari, isn't friend like Philos friend. It's like buddy, fella. It's like, fella, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you, or take your stuff and go. I choose to give to the last as I give to you. Well, nobody agrees to starvation wages. That's economic violence. And so what Jesus did here is expose to them. They're standing around listening, probably never thought about before. And he shows them in bold relief how they're being exploited. And that's exactly what we need to do. And I go back to the early 20th century with the Black Christian socialists. There was a gentleman named George Washington Woodbey. That brother was bad. He was a democratic socialist. He's a Baptist preacher, but he's a democratic socialist. And he preached against the exploitation of the people, the theft that the people experienced, the mistreatment they were experiencing at the hands of capitalists. And he would stand on the street corners in San Diego. The cops would beat him up, and he'd be back out there as soon as he got out of jail. They beat him up a few times, put him in the hospital a few times. He's back out there preaching and speaking out about the workings of oppression. And he wasn't the only one. A number of them did the same thing. And there were a lot of Black Christian socialists that we're not told were, like Mordecai Johnson, who was the first Black president of Howard. He was a Black Christian socialist who inspired Martin Luther King. Benjamin Mays was a Black Christian socialist who said that when he heard the Union leader Eugene Debs speak at Debs' trial, his conviction for preaching against World War I, when he heard Debs speak, he said he thought he'd heard the voice of Jesus. These people were standing up. Martin Luther King, as you know, spoke very vociferously against capitalism. What do we have now? Not a doggone word. Not a doggone word. The C word doesn't seem to exist. That's a principality and power that we should be concerned about. So we need to unpack these workings of oppression so people know what's going on. Like, it's not fair. I mean, it's not. For instance, I mentioned layoffs before. Folks think that this is just part of the business cycle. There's no reason for people to be laid off when you think about it, just because you want. I mean, they lay people off saying, well, we see a downturn coming. It ain't come yet. And if it comes, how much a downturn is going to be? People are going to need your product. It might mean you make less money, or it might mean you lose money for 3 months. But if you care about human beings, you will keep them employed. And some businesses do. But not now. And since Bain and Company, that Romney worked for, since Bain and Company started the management consulting industry, well, they were one of the earliest ones, which essentially said, what it essentially did was take all the humanity out of management labor relations, reduced people to numbers on the balance sheet, and labor is always on the liability side.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to cut, if they were, and management consulting was how to cut your liabilities, how to increase your profit. So What's your largest liability? Labor.
Yeah.
These are the kind of things that we should be
Yeah.
say, but no, not hearing it, not hearing it at all. But that we have a responsibility to do that. So that's also responsibility for preachers to read and to study, and for seminaries to teach these things to our people, because we know it's getting worse. It's not getting better. We look at these unemployment numbers, and yeah, people are employed 2-3 jobs, 2-3 little jobs. They can barely make ends meet. You know, this is, man, we're in such trouble. It's scary to think what it'll be like 10, 20 years from now.
You're mute, Wallace.
And I was too. It is interesting because you hit on so many powerful things. As you were talking about, a lot of that was accountability. Nobody wants to be accountable for being that voice and making a stand. And I assume people are afraid of repercussions. What's going to be the backlash on this? If I do speak up, who's going to not speak to me? When at the end of the day, somebody's got to take a stand. Because my mother, the gospel, bless her heart, she used to say, if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. How long do we not speak? How long? How long?
Yeah. And that's why we have to deconstruct this stuff to help people understand. And first, we have to take steps to try to understand it ourselves, and that means constant reading, constant studying, constant staying up on things. Preachers, use your studies to study.
Well, the oppressed, the oppressed have now become the oppressor.
Exactly. They should be reading a couple of newspapers a day. I read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal can be sickening, but we need to know what they're doing. A lot of preachers don't even read the newspaper, or you can't just read the local paper. You got to read a national, international paper to know if you really want to be a shepherd, if you really want to lead and protect your people. This is what we have to do. That's our responsibility. To the extent that preachers ain't doing that, well, then they're part of the problem. They're not part of the solution, and they're not fulfilling their responsibility as shepherd of the sheep. And I'd say to their faces, they're here. If they're not doing it, then they're not fulfilling their responsibility. They are enjoying a good job. I shouldn't say that. Some of them, let's say they're not fulfilling part of their pastoral responsibility, because some of them do, the pastoral side of it, looking out for the, sick, raising people's, spirits and that kind of thing. So but that's only half of it. There's the prophetic side that treats the causes of the people's suffering. The pastoral side deals with the symptoms of their suffering.
But Doc, help us understand. I mean, how you exegeted just a minute ago that Matthew 20. I just never, and I read. I love to read, and I do love exegesis, but I would never have seen that I guess because of what we've been taught from Sunday school.
Yeah.
The laborer represented God, so God's gonna give everybody something.
Well, the household.
That's not what I'm hearing you say the text is talking about.
No, the householder, we're told, represents God, right?
Yeah.
And the Greek word is wikos dispotes. I see someone has wikos institute there. So the wikos means house, right? And depotes, or the word that despot comes from, it really means house master, right? And I translate it as plantation master because he has all these vineyards and everything, right? And so he goes, do exegete it really quickly. He goes out and tells some guy, asks him, do you want a job? Well, come on. and they go and they're so desperate they don't even ask. And then he goes back out a couple more times, and he says, you know, whatever is fair, I will give to you. He's decided. He holds all the cards all the time, right? And then when it comes time to be paid, he pays everybody the same, even though some folk have worked all day long, and that's not fair. And then look how haughty he is, fella. I'm not doing you any wrong. You know, I didn't you agree with me? Get your stuff and get out of here. I do what I choose to do. I choose to give to this last as I give to you. That's my choice. I can do that. And am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or is your eye evil because I am good? That don't sound like no God I know. Now so Jesus, I mean, you think about it. That's if all Jesus was trying to tell folk is that, you know, that it doesn't matter when you come to the Lord, everybody's all right, everybody's the same. Well, then why are we told the context is these dispossessed workers in the marketplace looking for a job? I mean, you can't ignore that context. That gives it meaning, you know. But that's part of the problem. You're saying what, even though you're an avid reader, and I know you are, because I remember at Emory, you raised a question that lecturer gave there was like, wow, I didn't think of that. And so I know you read, and no, but it comes down to what we are taught even in seminary, and what we're not taught. And there is this big blind spot about looking at the setting in life of Jesus, and you know, being aware of the various modes of oppression. So I took time to write about that in the politics of Jesus, to give people, you know, some background.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Because we have got to expose in mass voices, not just one voice, but in mass voices, how the system is rigged for the powerful,
Yes.
and those who have, and not for the have-nots.
Exactly.
So we've got to figure out how we teach our people in Bible study, in Sunday school. This is information that we don't have to just accept what we've been spoon-fed. I mean, I went to seminary thinking I was going to get some more Sunday school. Boy, was I awakened. That was not the case. So when you think about how we are taught and the lessons, that the international lessons, I guess we need to figure out how to put some information in our people's hands. How do we give them the real gospel so that they are enlightened? And because if we don't have it in that text, Black folk ain't gonna listen.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so I ask my students, of course they don't do it, but I ask them to take a moratorium on Paul for a year and focus on the Gospels, read everything you can about the background of the Gospels of Jesus' time, the economic setting, the political setting, and all that, and really understand in a rich way, in a thick descriptive way of what Jesus was doing and what he was responding to, because he didn't just come out of the air for nothing. He was in dialogue with the times and the issues of the time. And until we know what those issues were, we can't get a clear view of what he might have been talking about. As with debt, for instance, you know, a lot of people think that's just a trespass. No, the Greek word ophilimata means financial debts. You know, but those things, and so yeah, we do need to teach that. We need. I've never been to Hampton, for instance, ministers, but I know what they don't teach there. And I don't, I mean, if I'm invited, I will go and share what I got to share. But until the time, I don't need to go hear a bunch of stuff that, I don't need to hear the singing. I can buy a record. You know what I mean? We need to start teaching. We need to start teaching people something. In our denominations, the National Baptist Convention, the AMEs, the AMEZs on, they need to have some real continuing education going on that preachers have to go to. And Dr. Bradford knows we have our bishops' retreats, and all we do is retreat. And that's about all. I once asked, and I was very innocent. I said, so, oh yeah, great. This is when I was new. I said, so the money from the bishops' retreat, that goes to what? The bishop. No, I know, but I mean, what does it use support? The bishop. I said, well, wait, you mean that everybody is required to come to the bishop's retreat to pay their money? At one retreat, I ain't gonna mention his name, but I am from the first one. Bishop, but one bishop, this is the truth. I know it for a fact. You had to buy your hotel rooms through his office. He offered the hotel rooms to his preachers for twice what the hotel offered them to him. Now, come on. Now, but let me be clear. I've had some good experiences with some bishops, like the bishop in the second right now. Oh my God, Dr. Bradford, Bishop
Davis.
Davis. I had good experience with Davis. I mean, he had a real. All I'm gonna say is, God bless him. In my estimation, he was doing exactly what needed to be done. I mean, he had teaching sessions, consciousness raising sessions. That's what we have. And we have some new bishops that were not bishops when I was president of Payne Seminary, and some of them I'm very happy about. There's some that don't want to come to churches. Our churches I'm not that happy about. And I'm gonna leave that alone. But we all know who that is. That's terrible. You can't set foot in any of your denomination's churches and you were a bishop. That's a shame, because I like that brother too,
Well, hallelujah. Well,
you have nothing to say. I didn't ask you anything, Dr. Bradford. So
well, Dr. Hendricks, go ahead, Dr. Bradford.
No. That was fun. I appreciate you, Dr. Hendricks. This has been an absolutely wonderful time. Very informative and intriguing, and it should bring awareness to all of our churches and our viewers to come. Hang backstage for us, and we're going to share what's coming up on next week.
Don't go anywhere.
Can I just say this? I want to clarify some things. There are some bishops I have very high hopes and respect for really, and they are doing some good things that need to be done that 10, 20 years ago was not going on, and they're very serious about making a difference. Yes. And there's a whole nother sense of, at least from my perspective, a greater sense of humility among the bishops, because there was a time when they just, bishops were strutting around like they were kings of earth, which has nothing to do with the gospel, let's face it. But there's some, so I'm not, I'm really, and last thing I'll say, God bless him. Dr. Bishop Jefferson invited me to speak to the whole bench of bishops about my latest book. That wouldn't have happened a couple of years ago. God bless these, and I'm so excited about these bishops, and I'm trying to support them any way that I can. I just want to make that clear that I'm not hating on them.
Oh no, we didn't gather that. We didn't get that.
There's some in the past I would have hated on, but they're gone. So
hang backstage. We'll see you in a little bit.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dr. Burns.
Go, Dr. Burns. Who's next?
All right, it's your guest next week.
Angela Parker. Yes. Angela Parker will be with us on next week. Come on in the room next week.
If you want to know something about womanist theology.
Yes.
She explains it better than anybody I know. So If God Still Speaks is her book. And if those of you that would like to purchase Dr. Hendricks' book, it's on Amazon, The Politics of Jesus. He's got a new book out. Bends Towards Justice. I'll get it to you in a minute. Thank you guys. Love y'all.
Okay.